Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. When you say what legal right, my mind goes to so many because there's so many rights of women that are not amplified or women have still have a challenge with enforcing or maximizing. And I'll just start with the simplest one that affects us all and is also enshrined in our constitution, and that's the freedom from discrimination. If I ask you, you can count myriads of times you've been discriminated against just because of your gender, and also unnecessary biases that women have faced, both at work, at home, in their secular life, just by being female. And the why I picked this is because it's not for lack of legislation that women still face discrimination, but it's a bias that is inbuilt that even legislation cannot take away. The only thing that legislation can do for us is that at least it makes us aware and it creates some punitive measures around it. However, that hasn't stopped society from discriminating on women based on their biases, just like at work. If a man and a woman are competing for the same role, most of the time there's a bias that, oh, the man may do it better. Or even like a labor law used to provide that women shouldn't work at night. Just feeling, well, it may have had a good intent in terms of not exposing a weaker gender in quote to harsh working conditions, but the the right to be free from discrimination to me is the greatest challenge that one of the greatest challenges that women face.
Yeah, and moving from your experience in the legal field, what are some of the biggest challenges that women face when they seek justice, and how can the system be more supportive of them?
The system, okay, as a lawyer, of course, everybody expects being a female lawyer, you should be able to speak up more than the average woman on the street. But I'll just take an instance with our justice system. If you visited any police station today, you'll see it boldly written, bail is free. And there is no mention or discrimination overtly as to whether a woman can bail. But 9 out of 10, it is difficult for a woman to bail another person because the conditions that they will give you will not include a woman. And if you also come to the judicial system, of course, there are so many female judges, so many female magistrates, and so many excellent female lawyers. But that hasn't also minimized, minimize is not the right word. That hasn't also stopped the fact that sometimes some firms may not even hire you just because you're female. I experienced that at the beginning of my career. There were some firms that wouldn't even grant me audience then just because I was female, and it didn't make sense. It's subtle, and some may even tell you things like, oh, you soon get married, you soon start having children, and you won't be able to put in your best. Nobody tells a man these sort of things. But I think, these are biases that one has to be intentional about not promoting and ensuring that everyone is given a fair opportunity regardless of gender.
Right. And what legal resources do women currently have to protect themselves from things like discrimination or violence? And also, do you think we need to make this protection stronger?
Nigeria has never lacked laws. If you ask me, I think we have too many laws that are unenforced or that we are not given the right enforcement to. Starting with the first point I made about discrimination, it is enshrined in our constitution that everyone, there's a freedom not to be discriminated against. But has it stopped? So one has, of course, you can sue that you've been discriminated against and the legal system will take its course, right? But most of the time, people don't even challenge these discriminations. And I don't know whether it's a cultural thing or just accepting it the way it is, but we have laws protecting the rights of women. With just like every woman has a right to be educated, but is that the case? And how many people challenge it? And even if you challenge it, there's no free education. So you still need the financial muscle to follow through with that. You have a right to own property, etc., and even a right to inherit. But these are things that we as individuals, family, circle, etc., have to be intentional about. And most times when people, even taking the right to own property, when someone dies interstate, nobody considers the female child. They go like, oh, we think of the man. Or if somebody has all female, they say, oh, he has all girls. But nobody says the same thing like when he has all boys. So those are the sort of nuances that society used to fuel to make the laws inefficient, despite the fact that we have laws protecting the rights of women. We people need to also intentionally maximize and be bold enough to be seen as the exception, because typically people don't want to challenge status quo so as not to be labeled. But sometimes if we want to change the system and change the narrative, we have to dare to be different and dare to be labeled different as well if we want to make things happen.
Fantastic. And if you could change anything about legal education and how it works, what would you do to make it more inclusive and empowering for young women dreaming of a career in law?
I will just say, starting from the home, it is tell your female child that it is okay to aspire to be whatever she wants to be. Tell your female child who wants to be a lawyer, don't give the impression, oh, you are troublesome, therefore you'll be a lawyer, or you talk too much, therefore you'll be a lawyer, or and those are the subtle things that make people even shy away from things they intentionally want to do. And when it also, of course, the legal system is not tweaked to favor any gender. It is standard enough, and it is therefore available whether male or female, and the way it is also instructed. However, where I would want us to be intentional about are those biases that affect the way we engage, the way we cut off. If a girl child is making a point, and I don't know about, but we see it in the boardroom, we see it in corporate environment. You are making a point. Sometimes the female are not bold enough. So I think we should raise the girl child and also invariably the female lawyer to give them more confidence to air their views, even if it's not right. The fear of failure cripples, and we raise our kids up, and I'm sure if we are Nigerians, we're very competitive as Nigerians. We want to be the best in everything. And the typical Nigerian parent does not suffer fools. You expected everybody must come first, forgetting that, people follow sequentially. I think we should be intentional in our education to let people know that it is okay not to know everything. Even if you fail, it is not the end of the world. But we portray this higher than life attitude and expect everybody, and sometimes the already timid woman feels more intimidated when faced with complex matters because of that imposter syndrome, which we have to be intentional about drowning and letting the female child express her voice a whole lot more.
And as a woman lawyer yourself, what role do you think that women in the legal profession play in shaping policies that affect women's rights, and how can they increase their impact?
I like to say that just like it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a professional village to raise another professional. And I look back, and all I can say is thanks to the senior female lawyers who took interest in me as a young lawyer and helped me gain first the self-confidence to be who I am and to keep learning. I remember in my early days, I started my practice in Port Harcourt, and I joined the Federation of International Female Lawyers, known as FIDA. And we had a lot of community engagements. Initially, I was wondering, why are we visiting so many communities in the area? But one thing that struck me, and thanks to the likes of Honorable Justice Elsie Thompson, Missy Nima Aguma, and co, these ladies exposed me to how to give back to the society and not to think of just yourself in the office, in your elitist world without the grassroots. There was, in some parts of our country, I don't know if you've heard about female genital mutilation.
Yes, I have. FGM.
Exactly. And it's practiced in a lot of communities around us then in River State. FIDA was instrumental in ensuring that there's a law passed against that. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we have laws and people have actually been intentional about promoting the rights of women and protecting them as well, the rights of the girl child. And these are ways we can influence the system to make it more accommodating for female. And recently we've heard loads of cases about domestic violence. Of course, not trying to imply that domestic violence is only against women. It could be against men as well. However, we know that the greater proportion of women, of gender-based violence is usually against women. And there's been a law passed against that. So where there are issues and people amplify their voice and are intentional about it, legislation is passed. It is now left for us to enforce those legislation and educate people, and also in our own personal biases, make sure that we don't accept the wrong things as the norm and make excuse, in saying that, oh, this is Africa, this is the way we are, right? So those are some of the examples I've seen come to play and how women have influenced in protecting the rights of women in our society.
Right, and having said all of these things, let's talk about the gender pay gap. How can the legal profession step up to address this and ensure that women have the same opportunities as their male counterparts, even when they're doing the same things?
I want to just point out, I don't know of any legislation that says that a woman doing the same work as a man will be paid less. I don't know. There might be, but I don't know of such. Reason I'm saying that is, it is policy or individual driven. Somebody comes to work in company A. Whoever is the hiring manager or human resources professional decides on the pay gap. The question is, the person making that call, why does he or she think in their mind that it is okay to pay differently for the same role? If it is not as a result of some bias in their mind or feeling that a woman cannot perform as equally. And what we can do as individuals and also as lawyers is, when you know of this, it is grounds for suing for discrimination. And even before suing for discrimination in terms of pay, the policymakers or the employers of labor or the human resource professional or the hiring manager, depending on how you are exposed, how you intentionally want to educate yourself, and we all have biases, but how aware you are of your biases to make sure that you don't discriminate. And another thing I would also ask of us is, when you know of such discriminatory practices, don't just sweep it under the carpet. Speak up. The worst that can happen in any situation is for the company to say no. And then you have a legal grounds to challenge that. But don't just accept it and say, well, at least I have a job. Yes, you're not just speaking up for yourself, you're speaking up for the person coming right behind you. But most of the time, we are too scared to challenge the status quo.
And for women who are up against barriers in the workplace, facing legal issues around domestic violence or reproductive health and whatnot, what advice would you give them to navigate these challenges?
Besides what the law has given as your right not to be discriminated against, and of course your right to maternity leave, it depends on you and I to make sure that where we work, the companies we work for, the people we hire, the people that are the gatekeepers, respect the constitution of our land, respect the laws of our land, and are also professional enough in their engagement. A friend of mine had to lose her job because she got pregnant while working for an institution when she had signed that she shouldn't get pregnant. And when she even gave me that example, I'm like, seriously? Somebody asked you to sign an undertaking that you wouldn't get married or get pregnant in the first 2 years of your employment, and you did sign. Of course, because of the high rate of employment, people accept to sign all sorts of things just to get into the door. But that is the question I asked. The organization that came up with such a policy, didn't they have a lawyer in their employ? or the human resource personnel didn't think of the laws of the land, the labor laws when we're coming up with such. And the people that have walked through those doors and even left, nobody thought of looking back to say, look, that company is doing practicing unfair practices and therefore should be taken up. So those are, I think that as things like this get noticed, please let us speak up against them and actually insist on them, being exposed, because I don't understand how people would, we're trying to create an, in quote, an egalitarian society, and yet there are different scales for measuring different people, right? This is where our voices need to be louder.
And when you say where our voices need to be loud, it brings me to this question. How then do you think that the international law can help to improve women's rights around the world, especially in places where challenges are most severe? I don't want to say Africa, but like in places where challenges are most severe.
I'll still come back. Most nations are part of the United Nations, and you have signed all the treaties. Again, we signed these treaties. Somebody needs to enforce them. The international laws have guaranteed the right for freedom from discrimination, freedom from slavery, the rights of the girl child, etc. And all the labor treaties. Of course, Nigeria and many other African countries have signed those treaties. But then you come back home, what then do you do with them? International law is what it is. It has given you the tool. What are we doing with them? Nigerian legal system is what it is. It has given us the legislations, the tools. What then are we doing with it? It's for me, the next action for us, because this is not the first time probably you're having this sort of interview, or I'm granting this sort of interview, but the point is, what next? Personally, I like being practical. If the law of my land says I shouldn't be discriminated against for being a female, and I experience discrimination, I'll challenge that. Now, if only Ozim challenges that, people say, oh, don't mind her, she's a troublemaker. But if you and I, other people, and men that are our allies as well, because you don't need to be a woman to protect the right of a woman, but you can be our ally. If you say, no, I don't want that to happen because I also have a daughter, I have a sister that shouldn't face this, the voices become louder. But when you make it a woman problem to solve, it does, because then you will be judged. You're only talking because you're a woman. But if you also feel that this is ours to make sure it doesn't happen, because I may not be a woman, but I was born of a woman. I have a sister, I have a daughter, and I don't want the same thing to happen to them, then the voices will become stronger and more credible.
I truly loved when you said what next, and it brings me to the theme for this year's Women's Day event. It's really interesting. It says women and girls' rights, equality and empowerment, and the hashtag being accelerating action. For me, there's no better way to put that. For you, Ozim, what would that look like for you when we talk about accelerating action?
I would ask myself, and I also want us to ask ourselves, okay, what can I do differently to give validity to these policies, the laws, the regulation? What can I do differently? And there's so many things we can do differently, starting from the home. How do you raise your girl child? How do you make your boys treat your girls? Do they understand that every human being should be respected regardless of gender? At work, when I see things not going well, what do I do? Do I look the other way and say it is not my business? Or do I challenge the system in a way to achieve results? Those are the steps we need to take, and be intentional. And I'll just give you a practical example. Growing up, I didn't realize what my father and my mom were trying to do until I became an adult. To be honest, I didn't understand that there's anything like gender at work. You are who you are. You come to work without thinking, oh, I'm a female lawyer. That wasn't my reality, because I was raised to think. I was raised to ask questions, to look at people when you're having a conversation, right? Though I had a clash of culture growing up, because you go to school and somebody will say you're being too forward because you're looking at the teacher right in the eye, and culturally that it is wrong. What that did for me over the years was helping me find my voice. Remember, that didn't take away the imposter syndrome, because regardless of how confident you think you are, sometimes you hear those voices that make you feel inadequate. But the only thing is, because you've heard affirmations over time, it will help you drown those voices. Please, parents, as you raise your children, let your girl stop hearing "stop it," and let your boys stop hearing "oh, don't worry, it's okay, boys must be boys." If I'm not, I know you want to raise pretty ladies, it is okay, but it's all subtle. A girl wants to climb the chair, come down, don't you know you're a girl? The boy wants to climb the chair, you look away, they climb, they fall, they get up, they pack themselves. Those little steps teach the children. One learns to be independent and take risk. Another one learns to be too cautious and looks for affirmation before they act. If we can be deliberate at that stage, let them discover themselves. If you climb the chair and you fall, you rub yourself and you move on. Next time, remove inhibition from the minds of your girl child. And also, as they grow, and like everybody will have this imposter syndrome, let there be a mentor. Let there be that adult to say, look, it is okay. I have walked this road before. It will be a disservice to our generation if we still continue that mindset of you have to be excellent. It is okay to be excellent, or you have to be, without giving room to risk or failure. You raise people that are not well balanced. Even if your child comes home with 0%, encourage them to try harder, but don't create like an utopic environment to make someone feel as if they have to be perfect. That way, in a bid not to be perfect, they forget to even challenge any situation that may not look right, and even blame themselves for that situation not being right. So that's, for me, is our intentional ways as human beings we can start challenging those status quo. And for us, the men as well, this is not a fight for women alone, if I can call it a fight. Sometimes we focus on women's rights as if we're the only ones to benefit. So imagine if your mom is working and is working in a very stable environment. She comes home a happier wife, a happier mother. But if you ignore it as, okay, as far as daddy is okay, we are good. Or as far as my son is fine, we're good. It affects everybody's well-being. So if your gender is not the one being discriminated against today, be an ally. And it is a collaboration. Everyone can put heads together and find how best to, achieve it.
Thank you very much, Ozim, for your time today. I wish you a lovely rest of your day. Do have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.